We're going to start off with Tzedakah and Tehillim.
Okay.
First, we're going to say chapter 20 and 150 of Tehillim. As we can hear on the screen, I'm not saying Mizmor David. Shlach Ezer Chami Kodesh, Mitzion Yisadeka, Yiskar Chami Chasacha, Vailas Kodesh Nesela, Yiken Chachil Vacha, Chalatzasacha Yimale, Rabbi Shuasacha, Hashem Eloheinu Nidgal, Yimal Yadina Kamishalisacha, Nata Yedat, Ikeshia Adnei Meshichai, Kanei Mishmei Kacha, Vigoroi Seja Yaminai, Eile Berechav, Eile Basos, Menachnu Beshem Adinai Eloheinu Naskir, Eime Karom Follow, Menachnu Kamna, Vani Soidad, Adonai Yeshia, Malach Yaneinu, V'Yainu Kareinu. I'll say chapter 150 and put money in the bushka, please. Wrong direction. Hallelujah, hallelujah, El Bekachai, hallelujah, Bekia Uzai, hallelujah, Big Verais, hallelujah, Kurev Gudlai, hallelujah, Beseka Shefer, hallelujah, Mevel Lachinar, hallelujah, Beseifu Macha, hallelujah, Beminim Ugav, hallelujah, Betzils Leshama, hallelujah, Betzils Leserua, Kollel Neshama, hallelujah, hallelujah. And we have some homework for you. This is from Rabbi Ginsburg. What's the gematria of the word Hamas?
I'm here. 8, 4D. Then you have Samach.
Samach and Aleph.
Okay, so you have Samach is already 60.
Yeah. And Aleph is 1.
And Aleph is 1. So you have
1 and 1, right?
So now you have 9, and then you have actually 60. You have the 40, so it's 109, right?
Okay, now what's the gematria? You know the Niggin, Pada V'Shalom?
No.
Hashem Pada V'Sh, Hashem redeems my soul in peace.
Well,
enough with the words Va'ani eftach bach, and I trust in you. What's the gematria of the words Va'ani eftach bach? And we'll start the Gemara while you figure it out. Okay, we're going to be holding the Mishnah in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Chaf Amud Beis.
Okay.
20b. If you have a article, it's 20b1. Ishkach Moshe and Rabbi Label and Yossi. Oh, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And Mike. And
good morning. Thank you, Rabbi.
Morning. And of course, Rabbi File. This Mishnah is a continuation from last Mishnah discussing mitzvos that could be done only during the daytime. We said preferably after Alois, after Netzachama, preferably after sunrise, but it could be done also from Alois HaShachar from when it begins to become light. The mitzvahs we mentioned in last Mishnah were bris milah, which has to be done only by day, reading the Megillah, going to the mikvah for everybody besides for Anida, sprinkling the ashes of the parah aduma. All of these are only done during the day. Our Mishnah continues with more mitzvahs that can only be done during the day, and we'll conclude with mitzvahs that can only be done during the night. So this Mishnah continues. First one is a repeat, which we've had before. You can read the Megillah, the daytime Megillah reading, which is the main Megillah reading, the entire day of Purim until it gets dark. I have been personally present when it was about 10 minutes before Shkia, before sunset, and so someone needed to hear the Megillah, and I personally heard somebody finishing the entire Megillah without skipping a word in under 10 minutes. But it has to be done only during the day before it gets dark. And for reciting Hallel, we only do Hallel during the daytime. The exception is the night of Pesach. When we do Hallel, we say Hallel during the Seder because we have to say it together with the Korban Pesach. Generally, Hallel is part of tefillah, part of davening, part of prayer. As a matter of fact, the Alter Rebbe paskins that if you have a Beis Avel, a house of a mourner, an Avel, in the house of an Avel, they don't say Hallel. Even if it's Rosh Chodesh, they don't say Hallel in the house of an Avel. So if someone was in the house of the Avel, they skipped Hallel. He says they should not say Hallel by themselves. It does not need to say Hallel afterwards by themselves, because Hallel is a din in tefillah. It's a din in prayer. It's part of davening. It's an extension of Shemoneh Esrei. Hence, we say Hallel straight after Shemoneh Esrei, and we don't say Kaddish afterwards. It's part of Shemoneh Esrei. On Pesach, when we say Hallel, it is not part of tefillah per se. It is rather a din in Pesach, and therefore, although we say it in shul, let's do it in public, but the main din of halal by the night of Pesach, we say halal during the night of Pesach in shul, and again, during the Seder, is mainly a din in Pesach, not a din in Tefillah and davening. Generally, halal is only said during the day. Those people in Israel who say halal by night on Yom Ha'atzmaut with a bracha, they have their own halachic authorities that they concur to, which that's who they follow. U'tkiya shofar, and for blowing the shofar, of course, shofar blowing is done only by day, not by night. U'netilas lulav, and for shaking lulav and esrog. Brought up a picture of shaking lulav and esrog. Must be done only during the daytime, cannot be done after it gets dark, after sunset. There's davening shachris, the daytime prayer, of course, has to be done during the day. Musaf is an extra prayer which we say on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh, essentially any day which there was an extra carbon tzibor, a communal carbon in the Beis HaMikdash, and those days we daven an extra prayer. And there are two opinions, as the Gemara will bring, in until what time of day can Musaf be davened. When it comes to tefillah davening, there is Zman tefillah, right? So just do Zman in Pittsburgh for today. Just pull that up. So today the Zmanim, it says Soif Zman tefillah, latest Shachris 10:33 a.m. That's when you should daven Shemona Esrei by. Now there's opinions which say Soif Zman Musaf, davening Musaf should be an hour later by 11:30 a.m. However, our Mishnah paskins that Musaf can be actually davened the entire day until sunset. It has to be done preferably, obviously, before Mincha, but even after Mincha, b'diavad, it's okay. So
when the time for Mincha comes, you should daven Mincha first.
Correct, before Musaf, right. But Musaf can be davened the entire day. Right? As Rabbi Carr pointed out, if the time of Mincha came and he didn't daven Musaf yet, he should daven Musaf. Mincha before Musaf. Musafin and the Beis HaMikdash itself, it was the same thing. The extra carbon can be brought the entire day. Although, of course, Zurizu Makdim in the Mitzvos, it's a mitzvah to do things the earlier the better, but it can be done the entire day. Ulavidoi haparim. The special karbanis cows in the Beis HaMikdash called vidoi. Vidoi, they would lean on the animal and say vidoi. We're specifically talking about a vidoi of a par helm davar shel tzibur, a communal offering brought by either Sanhedrin or the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, for any mistakes that they made when they paskin halacha adin. You can learn Mesechta Sanhedrin for the details of what are the circumstances that necessitate such a carbon. And there's different confessions that would take place in the Beis HaMikdash. We do vidoy like this. We do it on Yom Kippur. But the vidoy, the original vidoy, was anytime someone would bring a carbon, a sacrifice in the Beis HaMikdash, they would lean all their weight onto the animal on the head, and then they would say vidoy, their sins. So different vidoyim would take place, different confessions in the Beis HaMikdash. One of them is when somebody will bring what's called Meiser Sheni, Meiser to the Beis HaMikdash, a tenth of their, after they finished separating all their Meiser, they brought their tenth of their crops, they would bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. On Yom Kippur as well, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he would bring many karbanas, many sacrifices for the entire tzibur, for the entire congregation, and that all had to be done during the day. These are all different karbanas, and like every carbon is done during the day, this must be done during the day. The smicha, placing your hands on the carbon, also must be done during the day. Shchita, we're going to go through all different details of bringing a carbon. Shchita is slaughtering the carbon, the animal. The tnufa is waving. Certain karbanis require that you wave it. Carbon saita, carbon nazir, certain parts of the carbon, certain minchas, meal offerings, flour offerings, parts of the animal have to be waved. All of those have to be done during the day. Hagasha is when they would take the parts of the korban of the sacrifice that would be burned on the mizbeach, and they would put it onto a tray, and they would bring it onto into the close to the mizbeach to be brought to the mizbeach, and that itself was a type of avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Primarily, it would be done with a korban mincha. There's a special halacha, korban mincha, a flower offering had to be put next to the mizbeach on the ground, and then only afterwards, when a certain process was done, it had to be brought onto the mizbeach. It's called hagasha, and in the Torah, it's called the word v'hikriv, and he came close. As part of a korban, has to be done during the day. The kmitza, I pulled up a picture here of kmitza. Kmitza is whenever you have a flower offering, flour being brought on the mizbeach, it was mixed with oil, and it was either fried or rolled or baked in different types of pans, and there was only a very small part that was burned on the mizbeach. You would bring all together a hin, it could be about a half a gallon of flour or a little bit less, and they would take 3 fingerfuls. They take 3 fingers, dip it like this, like you see on the screen, dip it into the mixture of flour and oil. It's called a fistful, but only 3 fingerfuls, and then they would take the last 2 fingers, wipe off any excess, and that was a part that was burned on the mizbeach, on the altar. Everything else was baked or fried, depending what type of mincha it was, and eaten by the kohanim. That's a korban. That's a kmitza. Haktara is burning on the mizbeach the karbanis. Haktara is not the karbanis, burning the flour. Flour offerings were not allowed to be burned at night. Could only be burned during the day. Melika, I didn't pull up a picture of this one. Melika is a way, if you see today, many kohanim have very long thumbnails. They don't cut their thumbnail. And what's the reason why? Is because in the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan, the kohen had to have very long and sharp nails. Because there were certain type of karbanis, bird offerings, had to be shechted with their fingernail, called melika. And it wasn't shechted in a normal type of shechita. It was not eaten. It wasn't kosher. It wasn't kosher shechita. And it was only doves and pigeons, which incidentally are today some of the hardest things, animal birds to shecht. Even someone who could be a professional shechet will not know how to shecht a pigeon or a dove, because they have very, very thin necks, and any type of shechita, is very complicated. It has to be shechted in a certain side, in a certain angle. And in the Beis HaMikdash, they would not shecht a dove or a pigeon in a regular way. It was using the fingernail of the kohen.
Was it made of thumb?
It was done with a thumb, yeah. And it's called melika.
And so the kohen actually does it. The kohen actually has his actually thumbnail above today. It's only that he wants to be ready.
Exactly. When a kohen has a long thumbnail today, is because they want to be ready to serve in the Beis HaMikdash at a moment's notice. They shouldn't have to wait for the thumbnail to grow back in. And I'm assuming those kohanim who have long thumbnails will probably be first to bring the korban oif, all the flower bird sacrifices. Same reason why the Rambam says a kohen should not get drunk today.
Because he has to be ready.
He has to be ready to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And even more than that, it says many kohanim don't drink wine, because even a revius of wine can make someone drunk. And although it takes only 18 minutes, according to one opinion, to become sober, many kohanim still, the Rambam says, should not drink wine, because we're saying that we could assume perhaps that within 18 minutes from now, Mashiach will come already. We'll have the Beis HaMikdash, and a kohen has to be ready to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, already starting to do the avodah within 18 minutes from right now. And therefore, Kohen cannot drink wine today because of that.
Where else has to learn? Actually, have to be tutored.
Well, many Kohanim actually do learn halachas, and all the brisker yeshivas learn kachim for this reason.
Oh yeah, the Chaim actually to learn that he was actually having like.
Chaim was a kohen. He learned
Mhm.
all the halachas kachim, and in his yeshivas, many yeshivas today go in his ways. Brisker yeshivas primarily that they learn kachim, learn halachas of karbanis and the Beis Hamikdash. Continue the next one. Now we're going to talk about other aspects of karbanis. Kabbalah is they would have a special type of vessel, a cup, and they would receive the blood after an animal was slaughtered, shechted. Hazaya is sprinkling the blood on the mizbeach on the altar after it was shechted. Hashkaya saita, did I run a picture up for this one? No. I looked for pictures, I couldn't find any appropriate ones. For a saita as a woman who is given water by her husband to drink water, which Hashem's name was erased inside of it. And of course, that's brought with a carbon together with a sacrifice and has to, of course, be done by day.
And if she was innocent, she got the great bracha of having a baby.
Correct. If she's innocent, she'll have many brachas. Arifas ha'egla. This is called egla arufa. Egla arufa, you see, this is not in the Beis Hamikdash at all. This is somewhere far off in a barren wasteland. What is an egla arufa? Egla arufa is the first Jewish detective agency.
Ah.
They were warriors.
The warriors.
Yeah.
It's actually connected in this week's Parsha. Parsha's Vayeshev is because Yosef was sold to slavery in this week's Parsha. The last mitzvah he learned with his father before he was sold was the mitzvah of Egla Rufa.
Ah.
Egla Rufa is if a person, a Jewish person, is found out in the field,
That's
dead, not alive, and they don't know who was the one who killed him, who killed the person, and we lay the responsibility with the closest Jewish cities who are next to them, because the person passed through that city, and they should have made sure that the person had where to stay, where to eat, someone accompanying them, and the responsibility lies with the city closest to them. How does a city atone for itself, remove the responsibility from them? Says, so they have to do several things, but the mitzvah of Egla Rufa is take a calf, which is a young calf, which has many halachas attached to it. It never could have worked, it never got pregnant, never had a yoke on it, never carried a load on it. What? And find a place outside of the city, not necessarily where the person was killed, but a place outside of the city with a river next to it. And next to it has to be barren fields that are not developed, and preferably, it's called karka sela, fields that don't really have the ability to be developed, to be planted, and to grow. And if you're not sure which city is the closest city, they measure from where the person was to the closest city. They measure from the nose of the person, of the dead body, to the closest city. And then the elders of the city and the leaders and the rabbis of the city, they all come and they bring the calf, and they have to shech the calf, kill the calf right over there next to the water in a barren place. And they have to wash their hands and say, we are not responsible for this. We did not do any of this. We made sure that the person was accompanied by people from our city, and he had food and he had what he needed. And they washed their hands, and it's the Kohanim have to arrive there, and the Kohanim say, you see these people with pointed hats, are Kohanim, and they say, Kaper la'amcha Yisrael, may be an atonement for your city. And there's a lot of reasoning for the mitzvah, but of course, you're doing mitzvah because it's a chayk. They say a person who was, unfortunately, his life was cut short, so to atone for it, they take a calf which did not manage to have any children, come to a land which cannot produce any fruit, and to say that we we are doing everything to make sure such a thing does not happen again. And then you need an atonement because something happens in your area, you have to have a connection to it. He's a shliach in California. His name is Rabbi Chaim Drizin. He was in California. Now he lives in Florida, in Bell Harbor. So Rabbi Chaim Drizin was a shliach in San Francisco in the 70s, very active shliach. There was one time back then in the 70s, California was full of crazies. I don't know if it's any different now.
Oh, they still have their crazies.
There's a lot of crazies there,
including the governor.
So there were many, but then it was all the rage in America. Then in the 70s, there were cults and groups of all different sorts, of all different types, and it caught a very big fervor among Jewish people as well. So there was one, you could say, sort of cult, which had a stand down, they did some very wild things, and they were somewhere, I don't know, 100 miles out of San Francisco. And there's a very wild cult, and did a lot of crazy things, and the government cracked down on them. So the leader of the cult said, okay, everybody, it's a sign from heaven that whatever, we're not this. We all have to kill ourselves in order to perfect ourselves. And they all did a mass suicide, this entire cult altogether. Before the cult leader kept witnesses against him, he made everyone kill themselves. But anyways, there was a mass suicide which took place over there. And
he made them drink Kollel, poison Kollel.
Yeah.
There was another cult that did that.
Might have been more than one.
They made them drink poisoned Kollel.
I think there was one called David Koresh who had a few Jews, and a Holocaust survivor who killed himself. So I don't know if it was this one or a different one.
I forget the name of it, but they were on an island someplace. When they all drank poisoned Kollel.
Mm-hmm. So Rabbi Chaim Drizin, he gets a phone call from Rabbi Charakov, the Rebbe's personal secretary, which was known that if he's calling, it's 10 chance 10 out of 10 it's coming directly from the Rebbe. And you never know if he's calling. It could be even the Rebbe was online, and you would never know. And he gets a phone call from Rabbi Charakov, and Rabbi Charakov says, "How is it possible such a thing can happen nearby you?" And he tells Rabbi Charakov, I have absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't know anybody who was involved in the cult. I think they're all non-Jewish. None of them are Jewish. It happened 100 miles away from the city where I am. I am dealing with Baruch Hashem, all the Jews here in the city. I had no connection to it. So Rabbi Charakov says that if you're a shliach in the city, you're responsible for everything that goes on in the area, everything that goes on in the region. And he took that very seriously. So, true, these elders of the city had no connection to a person who was killed on the road and what happened to them. However, still, the fact that they're nearby, by definition, you have to have a connection to it. You have to take responsibility for it. That's the mitzvah of Egla Arufa.
He made Egla Arufa, this guy? No.
Did Rabbi Idris make an Egla Arufa? I don't think so.
You don't need a Mizbeach or a Beis Midrash. You could just...
Yeah, but you need a Sanhedrin, and you need Kohanim, you need a lot of other. It has to be Eretz Yisrael and many other stuff. And I don't know exactly how well they would respond in California to shechting a calf.
That can explain why
I do it all the time from veal. He eat veals from a calf.
Yeah.
When you eat veal, that's a calf that's shechted.
Interesting. Like Taran Lika,
actually, you can explain why we never received any news reports as far as it happening nowadays, because apparently we don't have a Sanhedrin. We don't.
No, many. Yeah. Well, in general, Egla Arufa is not a mitzvah that we can do today, for many reasons. Among them, we don't have a Sanhedrin, the Kohanim. If the killer is found, of course, he's prosecuted after. It doesn't absolve the killer. But another thing is that it became, unfortunately, very common to have murderers. It became a much more common thing.
So it was abolished then, right?
Correct. Yeah, so Mitzvah Egla Rucha does not apply today. Utaras HaMetzora, and for purifying a leper. Metzora is someone who has what we call leprosy. It could be one of many different types of skin ailments, which is a spiritual skin ailment that came from a result of somebody sinning, primarily Lashon Hara. And when they were purified, was a process that Torah talks about, Torah details, and it can only be done during the day. These are mitzvahs that only can be done during the daytime. Now, once we speak about daytime mitzvahs, we will also mention nighttime mitzvahs. Kol halayla kusher l'ksiras ha'omer. For cutting the carbon omer, the entire night is kosher. What is a carbon omer? I just brought up a little reenactment of it. Let's see.
Here, the Temple Institute, together with the women of the Temple Group, took another great stride forward in preparations for the service of the Holy Temple and just bringing the Holy Body offering to the Holy Temple. Is a biblical nature, more specifically, the Almond offering is a foundational offering consisting of new barley that is brought to the Holy Temple on the 16th day of the month of Nisan. This year, at the conclusion of the first day of the festival of Passover, on the 16th day of Nisan, barley for the Almond offering was harvested at Kibbutz Ruchama. Then, in Jerusalem, the kernels of barley were beaten, roasted, and sifted through 13 sieves, just as was done in the temple courtyard on this very day. You shall enter the room that I give you in this harvest. You shall bring an almond from your first harvest to the Kohen. He shall wave the almond before the Lord for your favor. On the morrow of the rest day, the Kohen shall wave it. The also instructs that the first grain of grain must consist of fresh barley kernels roasted in a perforated pan, and then bring out to a course meal. You shall place olive oil and frankincense upon it. The Almond offering of barley is brought from the first grain that is harvested in that year. From the time of the bringing of the Omer, the year's grain becomes permissible to eat. The Omer offering is uniquely connected to the land of Israel and is indeed a celebration of the land of Israel. Other grain offerings in the Holy Temple may be brought from the produce of other lands, but the Omer of barley must come from the land of Israel.
Yes, that's the idea of the carbon omer. So when they harvested it, wasn't it?
But to bring it.
So when they did harvest the omer, they made a very big to-do about it, and it was done the night after Yom Tif, so the second night of Pesach, and there was a very big ceremony involved with it. Many kohanim, there's a description, they would ask questions and answers and questions and answers in order to publicize it, to make a big deal, and to show how the Torah way is, the way we do it is correct interpretation of the Torah. So the carbon omer was cut by night, and this can only be done by night. You can't cut it during the day. If you cut it during the day, you got to recut new only by night. So cutting down the barley for the omer offering was the first new grain from the new year that was allowed to be eaten. Even today in Eretz Yisrael, for sure, you have to be careful on what's called chadash, a new grain. Outside Eretz Yisrael, we're not makar, and Chabad at least not makar on it. We go according to the Bach.
My ancestor.
Exactly. That's why the reason either makar on it, because it goes according to the Bach. The Bach was Rabbi Darren gave one time over here a long, beautiful shiur about this one Friday, saying why the Bach did what he did to help try finding something good, a limit schus, a defense for Jews who are not being careful in Chadash, which is essentially saying that it only applies to Jewish-owned fields in Eretz Yisrael. And he explained the pasuk But there are many circles which are careful about Yashan and Chadash, old and new. And Levi, everyone is careful about Yashan and Chadash. Should also be careful about Pas Yisrael. Because so that is cutting the carbon oimer can only be done by night. Burning the leftover sacrificial in the Beis Hamikdash, there were many times many karbanos, and many times the blood of the carbon was sprinkled by day, and the rest of the carbon which has to be burned on the mizbeach has to be done during the day. However, if they're not done during the day, they can be done the entire following night, but they cannot be done the next day. In this instance, for when it comes to finishing burning all the limbs of the karbanos, of the sacrifices on the mizbeach, it can be done the entire night after, and the entire night is kosher, all the way till the morning. The very first Mishnah in Mishnayos says that it's kosher the entire night, but it's better to do it before chatzos, before midnight, in order to stay away from an avera, in order not to start cutting it close. And then the Mishnah and Zaf and the Gemara will explain why we have to say this. Zaklal, here is a general principle. Anything any mitzvah, which the mitzvah is to do it during the daytime, like all the examples we gave, Megillah, Shofar, Lulav and Esrog, and any other mitzvah, and any other mitzvah, which the mitzvah is to do it specifically during the day. Mitzvosai, kosher kol hayoim, it may be performed the entire day. And obviously, this is only a mitzvah which the Torah does not give a specific time. For example, a korban pesach, Torah says, has to be done in the afternoon towards the evening. So you can't bring it in the morning. That much we know. Unless there's a specific time giving in the Torah, a daytime mitzvah could be done throughout the entire day, from early morning to late at night. Well, obviously, you cannot daven mincha in the morning, correct? That can only be done in the afternoon. But generally, unless otherwise specified, a daytime mitzvah can be done throughout the entire day. That's the Rebbe said to publicize the very first time the Rebbe came out with the tefillin campaign in 1967. You tell all the soldiers that one who did not put on tefillin in the morning is able to put it on the rest of the day, throughout the day. Davar shemitzvasei balayla, kasher kol ha-layla. Anything which a mitzvah is supposed to be done during the night, it's kosher throughout the entire night. Meaning you don't have to do it specifically in the beginning of the night or the end of the night. It's kosher the entire night. So, for example, eating matzah is allowed to be done the entire night because matzah is allowed. I'm saying it's a special mitzvah. So, therefore, however, the carbon pesach can only be eaten until chatzos, till midnight. After midnight, it's considered to be noiser, it's extra leftovers, you're not allowed to eat it after chatzos.
You said the carbon pesach, right?
The carbon pesach. So therefore, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when you ate matzah together with the carbon pesach, and you were not allowed to eat anything after the carbon pesach, that's called your afikomen, you weren't allowed to eat anything after the carbon pesach, you weren't allowed to eat matzah after midnight, during the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Now that there's no Beis Hamikdash, so we still eat matzah definitely the first night, before chatzos, before midnight. But if you didn't eat matzah before midnight, you keep matzah the entire night. Because the mitzvah of matzah applies the entire night. Unless the Torah specifically says that the mitzvah has a time limit, a cutoff point, it can be done the entire night. Okay, we're going to pause the Gemara here, and we'll continue with some more Kutres Umaayon. So we figured out yet the gematria of Va'ani Eftach Bach?
To see if she written
Take a calculator. Okay. We're in the middle of Maimer Chavav, Maimer 26, chapter 2. Talking about the concept of extremism. Shtus. It's very easy to get caught up in shtus l'umazeh, extremism of klipa, of the Yetzer Hara. It's foolishness. And just look at the world out there, and you just see how ridiculous and foolish some of the things going on, right? Could someone who's a boy be a girl? Could and people will talk themselves into corners to hold the most ridiculous things, and that's just one extreme example.
Yeah, and then they say, follow the science. Well, why don't you?
Correct. Right. So, and everyone, I'm sure, could think of another 100 examples.
Yeah.
How people will hold.
There's a billion people
Correct.
that think that the Kiviyachal had a relationship with a married woman and gave birth to himself.
Right.
A billion people.
A billion people in the world think of something very ridiculous, right? About Hashem could be a physical being and had a physical child, right? And they're
himself gave birth to himself.
Right, exactly.
It's
a shtus.
The only biggest shtus is the theory of evolution.
Correct. And you go through many religions, of course, which also have many things like that. Right. And then there's a religion that we can't be anti-religion, and it also has many things which, they will hold with the Emunah Pshuta. This is called Shtus L'Umazeh, but it's very easy there's no Yetzer Hara stopping you from listening to the Yetzer Hara. And the very first person which brought that down was, of course, Adam Rishon, Adam, the first man. When he ate from the tree of knowledge together with his wife, it made a big mix-up. Before, the Yetzer Hara was outside of you, wasn't inside of you. It was a separate thing. And now it got mixed in with a person, right? Like the example we gave last time is that why one person was davening to the other, why do Chassidim daven, speaking to the other, why do Chassidim daven slow? And if you have bandits chasing after you, and you're in a wagon, you try going fast. So if you're davening, daven quickly and focus, as opposed to going slowly, you get distracted and start thinking foreign thoughts during davening. And he says, when do you try going fast to run away from the bandits? If the bandits are outside. But if they're inside the wagon already, you have to slow down and stop and work and get them out before you continue. And throw them out. It says if the Yetzer Hara is outside of you, you're right. But if the Yetzer Hara is already inside of you, you have to work and fight with him in order to daven. Now, when Hashem created the first man, Hashem created him with the Yetzer Hara. As it says, Vayitzer Elokim, Hashem created a man with two yuds, because why does it say the word created with two yuds? Because he had two yetzers, a Yetzer Toiv and a Yetzer Hara. However, Yetzer Hara was outside and it wasn't so powerful. Rather, a person, Adam, his entire focus was only on holy spiritual things. He understood that there's physical pleasures, but he wasn't like, so what? Like, for him, it had no importance, no place for him.
And that can also explain it to why he and his wife, if we're not ashamed of being naked, because
we're doing a mitzvah. It wasn't like they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, but they're not having actually the feelings caught up with it. So it's sort of like it's like it's not inside you.
Correct. Is a newborn ashamed of being naked?
No.
No. Why not? Because there's no feeling of that it's supposed to be like this, not supposed to be like that. V'zehu inyan hashtus shemitzad Yetzer Hara. This is part of the foolishness engendered by the
Yetzer Hara.
Exactly. Because the Yetzer Hara has overwhelmed the senses and has made a person very aware of what's going on around them and what they need and what I don't need, and my back, and I need a hot mikveh, and it should be the biggest type we all have. And he could very easily lose the right perspective. and it's only a downward spiral. And unless you stop and look where we're holding, it's just going to continue in this same path, right? And this is part of the spirit of foolishness which comes from klipa. There's what's called the Umaayon min hadas, above understanding. Like as the Rabbi said, Mashiach will come. It says b'hesach hadas, when no one's expecting it, when you don't pay attention. And so the Rebbe explained, then how can we do? And people would say, you're demanding Mashiach, you bring Mashiach to everyone's attention. Has to come when you lose attention. The Rebbe said, Hesach hadas means when l'mayla min hadas. Das means knowledge or proper behavior. When you lose your rationality over it. Rationally, normally, if you need something, you ask politely. You mention it once in a while. But if you want something very strongly, you're going to be obsessed over it, non-stop, day and night and day. That's called the Umaayon min hadas, above knowledge. The opposite side is the Umaayon min hadas. To do things that makes no sense, even though you know it makes no sense, and not even try to rationalize it. So what's the opposite of shtus of klipa, shtus of foolishness?
Would be shtus of it's holiness.
Oh, very good. The opposite is the foolishness of holiness. Example we gave was someone making the chassan, Rabbi by Levi, and Shimon, who made the chassan and kala happy, exceedingly happy, dancing, making cartwheels, even though everyone says this is ridiculous. This is someone for you, someone your caliber should do this. Yes, it's exactly. It's called the shtus of kedusha. Ela shulamayla mitamidas. He also doesn't act normally. Shulamayla mitamidas. He goes above understanding. If you he doesn't go according to natural feelings, natural ways. The what we've been accustomed to, what we've been sort of initiated and programmed to follow, because that's what the world out there does. These are the norms and the standards, which is expected from everyone, and that's what we follow. And someone who's in Kedusha L'mayla mitamidas, he goes above any rationality in a good way. He breaks those norms, he breaks those expectations and barriers. And even he's not listening to, you could say, the norms of what you could say a tax-paying or a citizen or even what a Torah Jew should do. For example, Esther, when she went to King Achashverosh, did she ask a rabbi, am I allowed to do it? She would have asked a rabbi, a Rav, am I allowed to put my life in danger? Rav probably would have said no. There's a very low chance of succeeding. You have no right to put your own life in danger. There's no immediate urgency because the decree is only in a year. Wait until the king calls you and then bring it up. And instead, she goes immediately after 3 days listening to Mordechai, going up here Mesiras Nefesh. You don't even go according to the calculations of Kedusha. You don't say, oh, this is a way Torah wants me to do it. He acts by the intensity of the neshama, higher than rational faculties. My grandmother's side, my father's mother. So she came from a very long, distinguished line of Chabad Hasidim for many generations.
Was this
my grandmother, right? And what's interesting is there was a big chassid named Mordechai Duchman, and he was looking for a chassid for a chassid of some of the Marash, Tzedek. He was looking for a chassid for his daughter. Was looking for a groom, for his daughter, a bacher, a boy. And he went to the yeshiva, and being as a very respected chassid, he asked around, who's the top bacher in the yeshiva, looking for a good bacher or one who could learn very much, a very mensch, a nice person. And there were two labels and two bacher named Label in the yeshiva. One is called Label the Schwarze, one is called Label der Geller. Label the black beard and Label the blonde beard.
What was the second one?
Label the Schwarze, the black beard, and the Geller, the blondie. Right? So everyone told him you should go to Label the Geller, Label the blonde beard. He's a top boy. So he went to the Rosh Yeshiva and he asked him for can you introduce me? I would like my daughter to have a shidduch. And he's very respected, a chassid. And he told him, yeah, which bacher, I'm looking for a specific bacher, name is Label. And they said, yeah, sure, we know exactly what it is, great bacher. And they sent him by mistake the wrong label. Instead of Label there, they sent him Label the Schwarze, Label the black bear instead of Label the blonde bear, and they got married. Right? That's how Hashem makes shidduchim. And although maybe he was not the top one in the yeshiva, but he was probably must have been a very great yeshiva because he finished Shas many times throughout his life. He gave a shiur in Gemara for 40 years. There's even like a becher that the members of his shiur got for him as a gift. And it was in my grandparents' house till somebody stole it, New York City. So he's a very good bacher, but he didn't grow up as a chassid. He grew up in a very, you could say, snagdish type of house. But right before his marriage, it was very normal people to go from yeshiva to yeshiva. Chassid went to non-Chassidic yeshiva, non-Chassidic went to Chassidic yeshiva, and so he got married. A very good boy. And after he was married, he was married to the daughter of a great chassid, Mordechai Duchman. Okay, he became a chassid as well.
Does he marry like your grandmother?
He married my grandmother's grandmother. You could say. Okay, we go back many generations. Okay, so after he married into a Chabad family, and he started learning Chassidus with his father-in-law. Mordechai Duchman was one of the top students of Rabbi Hillel Paracher, a great chassid, and eventually he became a chassid as well after his marriage. And he was very, very kind person, very nice person, a big Talmid Chacham. My grandmother remembers as a little child, she used to go to a little town called Luga. I passed by Luga when I was in Russia. It's on the highway between Moscow and St. Petersburg. You'll pass by the town of Luga, maybe 2 hours away from Pittsburgh, from Leningrad, Petersburg. It's like it's a quiet village, now it's a city, but it's a small city. And as a matter of fact, our Rebbe, when he had to hide in Russia for a few months, because before he left Russia, he was in hiding for a few months. He hid in the town of Luga by the shochet of the city. The Rav of the city. His name was Cohen. His grandchildren, the Rabbi Nizro Shayashov Cohen, like that's his grandson. And she remembers beautiful memories that she used to go outside the city, onto the mountains outside the city. It was like a sort of like a vacation, like a bungalow type of place for people from the city. And you own the house there, and her and her sister would carry a stool. For the grandfather would go outside of the city onto the mountains in the city.
Are we talking about ancestors?
Yeah, ancestors, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, my grandmother and her sister, when they were little children, they'd go outside of the city. They would take a step stool, and the Gemara, and the grandfather would go with them and learn. And the grandfather would sit on the stool, and he would learn Gemara for many hours outside, on the hills outside of the city. And they would play, and those were her best memories as a child. She loved his grandfather, absolutely adored him.
Does your grandmother
adored her grandfather, who was a very big Talmid Chacham? Right, his name was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Meisel. Meisel, I'm sure related to many of the Meisels, and related to Dovi as well. Now, the other grandfather, his name was Reb Chaim ben Sion Raskin. Okay, this Reb Chaim ben Sion Raskin, he, you could say, was an exact opposite of the other grandfather. He was, you could say, much more of a Tehillim Jew.
Yes, he was another ancestor of yours.
The Raskin married a Meisel, the child. What?
What's more what? He was much more.
He was the exact opposite. He was a Tehillim Jew, all the way, a very serious Tehillim Jew. Yeah, he could learn like all Jews learned, but like he was, that wasn't his main thing was Yiras Shamayim, fear of heaven. And when the communists took over, he would even before that, where there was different enlightenment and things, he would do everything he could to make sure his kids wouldn't go to a public school, this school, that school. He would say, I would love to take my kids and my family and go away to a desert island until they grow up. We should have no influence from the outside. He sent his children away from there. He moved from a Jewish city to a very non-Jewish town called Jizatsk, was a very small, frum community, because he says he doesn't want them to be influenced by any of the movements that are going on outside. So he left a big Jewish community where you had sushi restaurants, and but in order to, and he would tell all of his kids and grandkids about how you're not allowed to go to public school. You're not allowed to listen to the communists. Says you're you know who you are. You're from the Raskin family. And if he would see any of his children with a Russian book, he would get so angry and upset, or grandchildren, and he would scream at them, take that away, throw it out. He, of course, he loved them as well, and every morning he would wake up at the Rabbi spoke about him, wake up at 4:00 in the morning, and he would say Tillim with tears. What was he saying Tillim about? Not that they didn't have food, not that they didn't have livelihood or money, not that they didn't have health, but he would daven and cry that his children and descendants should go in the way of the Torah. And she was actually scared of his grandfather, because whenever they would go visit her, and they lived in the same city when she was growing up, he would always scream at them, how you're not allowed to go to public school, and you're not allowed to give in to them, and you have to keep Shabbos, and she didn't like him as much. She was more scared of. One grandfather she loved and adored. Well, my grandmother growing up, she would tell us these stories. That's why I'm repeating it. It has to do with this. It's called Shtus Kedusha. So one time, one of her relatives is walking down the street, and there's full of bridges and canals over there in the city of Leningrad. And he sees that the grandfather is standing by a bridge and looking over and crying. As he's looking over, there's it was one of the Russian, the Red Soviet celebration days, and there's a big parade going on, and they're waving red banners, and there's young school children, and army people, and they're marching in a parade, and they see, and he's standing and watching and crying, and they're saying, "Why are you crying? Everyone's so happy, Zaidi. Everyone's happy. Why are you crying?" And he says, "I'm crying because look, they're all celebrating, and we're not celebrating our Beis Hamikdash. What's there to celebrate about?" Anyways, when it came to communist persecution, so one grandfather was very, like I said, militant. You're not allowed to give in to them. You're never allowed to go to public school. You're never allowed to associate with them. The other grandfather was a big Talmid Chacham. You have to be more, listen, if you have to go to a public school, because that was a law, the yeshivas were closed, and you're forced to go to public school, they send the parents away, they arrest the parents. So you don't gain anything by not sending your children to public school, because they're going to arrest you and take the kids anyways, and put them in an orphanage. At least now they'll be at home. You can teach them at home or something.
And he was the one who became a chassid of Padbury.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning, he was much more, how you say, more with the times, more compromising than the other grandfather. He didn't have, we could say, in the same way, the shtus, the foolishness of kedusha, of holiness. And what the outcome is, we see generations later, is that every single one of Chaim ben Tzion's children and grandchildren, and truthfully, I think great-grandchildren as well, all stay from.
Which one was this actually?
The Raskin one, the extremist one.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the other one, his children, some of them stayed from, a lot of them didn't, right? A lot of them went to different, whatever, faraway cities and whatever. And, actually, some of them have relatives who are Jewish, aren't intermarried, meaning they didn't have the shtus to kedusha, the shtus, the foolishness of holiness. So, and many times you ask a Rav, ask a rabbi, ask Allah, what do you think is right? What you should do in such a situation? You see, when it came over there, the only ones who held up the banner and their children walked out with generations of frum, chassidim, Talmidei Chachamim, is those who listened to Friedrich Rebbe and went on Mesiras Nefesh, the idea of shtuf, foolishness, shalamayla, mitam v'das. Sorry for holding everyone late.